close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go.
Hello friends, welcome back to another weekly meal video where I share with you some of the things that I made for my family this week. But if you are new here, welcome. This week I wanted to keep with my usual theme of budget-friendly family meals, but I also wanted to share some summer favorites. I usually start my videos with breakfast, but this week I'm switching it up and starting with dessert. A couple of years ago, we got an ice cream maker, and it's one of just those really cheap ones. I think you can get it from Walmart or probably really anywhere. They come with like mixes and stuff like that, but I always like making our own ice cream. I feel like the flavor is so much better. So that is what I'm starting today's video with. We're going to make a couple of containers of ice cream. This recipe is very simple. It has very minimal ingredients, and I feel like it's a very tried and true recipe. And you can find it along with the other recipes from today's video down in the description box below. I'm starting out with a cup of sugar, 3 tablespoons of flour, half a teaspoon of salt, and 2.5 cups of milk in this big saucepan. I'm letting it warm up and thicken slightly before I temper the eggs. Now to temper the eggs, I put in a couple of ladles of the warm mixture into the eggs, and I kind of mix them up really good. I probably did it a couple more times than I really needed to, but this process, I don't know, it always scares me. So I always kind of make sure that I do it a little more than you probably need to. Once I have the eggs tempered and added back to the pot, I mix it together really well, and I cook it for about another minute or two, and then I'll add in the vanilla, and then I'll take it off the burner and let it cool slightly before I add in the 2 cups of cream. One thing I noticed about the ice cream machine that I have, like I said, it is very cheap. It is not one of the fancy ones by any means, but it can kind of take a while if your mixture is not really cooled down. So after I've added all the ingredients, I'll take it off the burner and I will cool it down as much as I can, usually about an hour. And then during that process, I will take the metal bowl that it actually churns the ice cream in, and I put that in the freezer for that hour. And I feel like that completely speeds up the process of the ice cream. It takes hardly any time compared to the times where I've actually had it cool down for a less amount of time, or I forgot to put the ice cream churn container into the freezer. So it has cooled down and is very cold and frozen. So I'm putting the mixture in, and then I will put it in the ice cream machine and let it do its thing. The first batch that I did was just vanilla, so I didn't add anything extra to it. And for the second batch, I did what is usually my family favorite, which is coffee flavored with chocolate chips. So I did exactly the same process. However, I added in 1 tablespoon of instant coffee, and then I added a handful or 2 of chocolate chips while it was churning. And what good is ice cream without some chocolate syrup? So I am making some chocolate syrup for the very first time ever, and I will never buy store-bought again. This was awesome. It tasted just like store-bought, and it was quick and easy. It had very little ingredients, and it filled up almost an entire large mason jar. So I will forever be making homemade for sure. This chocolate syrup was put on our ice cream sundaes, but also it's really good in chocolate milk. My kids love chocolate milk, so this was a huge hit this week. To make the chocolate syrup, all I did was bring to a boil 1 cup of water, 2 cups of sugar, and 1/3 cup of unsweetened cocoa powder, and then I boiled it for 5 minutes. Now I want to say that this actually made more than like a large thing of the Hershey syrup that you get in the store. It filled up almost an entire like large mason jar, and I want to say it might have been more, and maybe my kids just got into it before I put it in the mason jar, but But either way, for the price and the flavor, it was well worth it. I am moving right along to our next recipe, which is probably breakfast, but we had this for lunch. This is a potato and bacon quiche. I also did do like some onions in the oven. I cooked them in the bacon grease with a sprinkle of sugar on them, kind of caramelized them a little bit, and I put that into the quiches too. Now, this was the ingredients for one large quiche. However, I ended up having leftover ingredients, and with the scraps for the crust, I made another smaller, I want to say it was like a medium size cast iron pan, and I put the crust in that, and I made a second smaller quiche. So this does make extra if that's what you're looking for. If you are one that likes to freeze things ahead of time, this is a great recipe to do. I love having quiches in the freezer to be able to, whenever you have company over or you just need a quick breakfast or lunch, this is great to take out of the freezer and pop in the oven and not have to make them completely from scratch. And this recipe, like I said, in my opinion, it made extra, and I followed it pretty closely. So it did make extra, and this is kind of a larger pie pan too. It seems larger than the other ones I have, so I had extra with using a larger pie pan. I am taking off the extra pie crust that I had, and that is what I will use to make a second one. You, of course, can use a little extra over the top if that's something you like. One thing I did notice about this crust in particular, it was a little thicker than I would have originally wanted, so I'll probably roll it out slightly thinner next time I make this. But other than that, this recipe was really great and super simple. I'm piercing the crust with a fork all over to prevent air bubbles while it's baking, and then I'm going to throw it in the oven for 10 minutes to pre-bake before I put in the filling. While the crust was baking, I sliced up some potatoes pretty thin, and then I put them in some water and boiled them for about 5 minutes. This helps cook them a little bit before you put them in the quiche, and that way it doesn't take as long. I've already pre-cooked the bacon, and I'm letting it cool before I chop it up. But while that is cooling, I am slicing up some onions, and like I said, all I did was cook them in the bacon grease, still on the same sheet and everything, and I coated them with the bacon grease and then sprinkled a little bit of sugar on them and let them cook down in the oven. In this large bowl, I'm going to mix together all the stuff that I'm going to put in the filling. If you're wanting to add anything extra like spinach or really anything, peppers or whatever is your jam, you can definitely do that here. Now, there is one thing that you will not see me put in because I completely forgot and had to go back and do it, but the cheese, which is a pretty important thing. So I did add the cheese, you're just not going to see me do it. The onions are cooked down, so I'm going to add them to the mixture, and I'm just now noticing that I kind of put my video a little bit out of order. So you saw me adding the bacon, but here I am cutting it. That is just a part of the process, I guess. The pie crust is now done with its pre-bake, so I'm going to put in the filling. You can put the potatoes in with the egg mixture and the onions and stuff too. And I thought about doing that, but I kind of cooked them a little longer than necessary. And so I didn't want them to kind of mash up and stuff in the egg mixtures. I went ahead and just layered them on the bottom of the crust and then put the onion mixture on top, and then I put the other egg mixture on top of that and kind of stirred it in very carefully. So you can do it either way. I just didn't want to end up with mashed potatoes in the quiche instead of the potato slices. I'm pouring the egg mixture over top of the onions and potatoes, and then, like I said, you won't see it, but I did remember to put in the cheese at this point, stir it up, and then put it in the oven. Here I'm rolling out the smaller crust, and then I'll assemble a smaller quiche and put that in the oven too.
Crowded places, feel it sinking in. Lonely faces, say you need a friend. No matter the distance, I will always be there. No more inhibitions, I'll show you I care. You've been lost and alone in the city of lights, I know. Getting hot, feeling low, and it's out of your control. You should know that I won't leave you. I'll stay beside you. I'm never letting you go. You've been lost and alone in the city of lights, I know. But I will guide you home. But I will guide you home. But I will guide you home. Fight your battles, always by yourself. In the shadows.
This is just the same process, but a different dish. And I want to say that this medium size made like 4 large pieces of quiche, which was really nice. I ended up just sending it to work with my husband, and him and the guys at the shop were able to eat it for breakfast. So it worked out really well. Whenever I was pouring the mixture on top, I did notice that with the cheese, it just seemed a little too thick. So I did add an extra egg to this and mixed it up really well, and then popped it in the oven. Here is how the other one turned out. They both turned out really good. And like I said, I love how these can be done ahead of time. You can pop them in the freezer and then take them out whenever you have guests or you have a busy morning. These are also so versatile because you can really add anything you're wanting into them. We are moving on to our next meal, and this I think is my family's new favorite. So we've all heard of the Mississippi pot roast recipes, and there's even the Mississippi chicken recipes. This one is smoked Mississippi ribs. I think this recipe can be done with a couple different cuts of meat or even variations of different kinds of meats, but it was incredible. I feel like it was the smoking process that really did it. If you don't have a smoker or a grill that will smoke, you can easily put like some smoke, liquid smoke, I think is what it's called, in with it, and put it in your oven low and slow. So what we started off by doing was we just seasoned the ribs very lightly with salt, pepper, and I want to say it was onion or garlic or maybe both. And then we seared them on the grill for only a couple of minutes on each side. And then we took them off the grill and I put them in this disposable baking dish. And the only thing that I did wrong here is the baking dish was a little too big. So I do suggest, if you're going to do that, that you do a smaller dish, because you will put in like gravy and stuff like that to create a liquid that it cooks in. And I feel like it will be more evenly dispersed if you do like a smaller dish and it doesn't have, too much room for the gravy to go. But even with that, it was incredible. So we're already have it on our list for next week. Actually, it was such a favorite. Everybody loved this. And I know a lot of people serve this like over buns or bread or something like that, which we usually do, but I did this over mashed potatoes and a vegetable, and everybody gobbled it right up. So it is basically the same recipe as like a Mississippi pot roast recipe. However, you're just smoking the ribs a little longer in the sauce, and you sear them for a couple of minutes, like 4 or 5 minutes on each side before you do the whole process. Now this smoked for 1.5 hours uncovered, and then I went and smoked it covered for another 1.5 hours. While those were on the grill, I went ahead and started some loaves of bread. I have not been staying on top of this in recent months. I think I've just been a little too busy, and I talked a little bit about it during my last video for my grocery haul. So I'm wanting to get back into it, and I bought a bunch of stuff to kind of make things homemade from scratch, and really wanting to just get back into the swing of things. Now that things have kind of calmed down a little bit, I'm wanting to settle down and do more of that stuff. So that is what I'm doing here. I'm making just some simple white bread, and my family loves having this with a smear of butter and jam. So we had this with our dinner as well. I think summertime and springtime are some of the best times to get in some baking, and if you're wanting to practice with like sourdough or baking breads or really anything like that, summer is such a great time because the kitchen starts to warm up and it helps rise the bread. So I always love baking all this kind of stuff when my kitchen is nice and warm, because it rises so much faster than it does in the winter time. This is just a normal yeast bread. I do have my sourdough starter going, and it is doing really well, but it is not quite there to bake with yet. So I do plan on doing some sourdough bread and the cinnamon rolls and the cookies, all that kind of fun stuff coming up here soon. But if you are intimidated at all by sourdough, I know some of you are, this is a yeast bread, so you can easily do that too. And although this recipe makes 2 loaves, I ended up having to make bread 2 days in a row. So I had to make 4 loaves of bread because my family, I guess they were missing homemade bread as well. And they ended up eating through the first 2 loaves in that one day. They had it for breakfast and lunch and dinner. And I want to say even Theo had some for dessert. He is probably my biggest fan with all the homemade baked goods and stuff. And so it was just so funny because you could tell everybody was so missing the homemade stuff that I had been making for so long, but have kind of taken a little step back from it. So it's good to feel that once again coming back and everybody enjoying it. Here's how the ribs were about an hour and a half in. So I covered them up and cooked them for another hour and a half. It might have actually cooked a little longer, like 2 hours, until they were shreddable. And this is our dinner for the evening. It turned out wonderful. And these ribs, I want to say, and I'm not positive, but I think that they were called Boston beef ribs, which is something I've never heard of, but they were only $5 for a pack at the store, and we ended up getting 2 packs, and we had plenty of leftovers. We are now moving on to the last meal of our video, and during my grocery haul I talked about these because I wasn't sure how to pronounce them, and I'm still not sure how to pronounce them, but someone else called them Pennsylvania Dutch noodles, and so I don't know if you've heard of those. I had came across an article with these, and I thought that they sounded and looked really good, so that is what I'm making. And they're kind of like a stuffing. It was pretty interesting, and my entire family loved them. The only thing that I did not like about them was the amount of stuffing that I ended up, or not stuffing, but kind of breadcrumbs, I guess. It kind of creates a stuffing mixture, and I did not love the quantity of it, and I think that's just a personal preference. So when I do make these again, I'm just going to do probably 3/4 of a cup instead of 1.5 cups of the breadcrumbs. Other than that, this was a wonderful dish. And I did hear that it was actually kind of old school. Like, a lot of people were saying, oh, my grandma used to make this. So it's kind of a vintage recipe, and it has those flavors. It has those homey vintage flavors from your grandma's house, and it was a really wonderful dish. So I do plan on making this quite a bit, but just reducing the amount of breadcrumbs, and I think other than that it will be perfect. We ended up serving these noodles with some pork chops that we just put on the grill. I sliced those, and then we had a vegetable, and that was dinner for the evening. There's something so great about summertime and just firing up the grill and having a really simple meal. That is something that we like to do all summer long. We get very, very simple with our meals. We have, a couple different cuts of meat that we usually get for the week to either smoke or put on the grill, and then we pick various sides, and I like to mix them up. And I'm pretty glad I found this recipe because it adds to another side that I can make during the summertime, especially while we're still waiting for our veggies to start coming in the garden. I like to use those all summer long too, but while we're waiting, this is a really great recipe to do. So like I said, the only difference I would do is this amount of breadcrumbs right here, and making it tasted like a stuffing mixture. That would be the only thing that I would reduce. It just seemed to kind of take over the dish for me personally. Like I said, my family, they all enjoyed it. It might just be me. So maybe if you like stuffing a ton, then this would be a good recipe for you. But I'm just layering the butter noodles down in this baking dish, and then I'll put a layer of the stuffing on top, and then I'll repeat the process, and you pour the gravy over top of it, and then you bake it in the oven for a couple of minutes, and then you switch it over to broil and kind of get that nice crunchy effect on the breadcrumbs. Next time when I make this, what I'll do is, instead of doing the layers, I'll probably just put all the butter noodles in the pan and then do about half the amount of the breadcrumbs over top, and then the gravy. I think that would be the perfect quantity, and it would be a lot better for me, in my opinion, because I'm not a huge fan of stuffing. But if you are, then you probably don't have to make any adjustments at all. But here's how dinner turned out. I love making more vintage recipes, and I actually just got a vintage cookbook, so I'm pretty excited to start cooking my way through it. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I will see you in the next one. Bye.
No matter the distance, I will always be there. No more inhibitions. I'll show you I care. You've been lost and alone in the city of lights. I know. Getting high, feeling low, and it's out of your control. You should know